Hi, so this is the PowerPoint for variation and evolution review sheet. So I'm just going to quickly go through the answers for you. So if I zoom in, the first question, what does variation mean? So we're looking at the term variation, and variation just means the differences in species. Even though we are the same species, there are going to be differences between us. We don't all look the same. Some examples of how we are different are, for example, our hair colour, our eye colour, height, weight, and we could name so many different things: foot size, hand size, etc., fur colour for animals, colour of petals for plants, etc. Describe sexual and asexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction is reproduction with two parents, and asexual reproduction is just reproduction with one parent. And as you remember, sexual reproduction takes place in mitosis and asexual is meiosis. Which type leads to a variety and why? Sexual reproduction is DNA from two parents, as we have said, which then we get half our DNA from mum and half our DNA from dad, which leads to those differences. Not even all siblings look the same because it all depends on what genes they inherit from their parents. Describe how these topics indicate ongoing evolution. So as we know, we've been taught that there are 6 sentences that we need to use and only use, and then we change specific words. So all bacteria show variation. The bacteria mutate to give antibiotic resistance. So this is part of the question. Okay, and there's our animal, our bacteria. Bacteria with the antibiotic resistance survive, and the ones without it die. This is known as survival of the fittest. Bacteria with antibiotic resistance, which is writing the same thing over and over again, which you can see, reproduce and pass on their genes. This continued for many generations will lead to a new species. And we can do the exact same thing for warfarin resistance in rats. So again, they can ask on any animal. You just have to read the question, find the keywords. So warfarin resistance, and our species is rats. So the same 6 sentences. First sentences, all rats show variation, so they all show differences. The rats mutate to give warfarin resistance, which we can see. Rats with warfarin resistance survive, and ones without die. This is known as survival of the fittest. Rats with warfarin resistance reproduce and pass on the warfarin resistant gene. This continued over generations until a new species is formed. So again, we're writing the same 6 sentences, just we're adding in the specific details to the question, but we can do it for any organism. If I scroll up. What are mutations? So mutations are changes in DNA, and it could be the structure of DNA, and it could be that part of the bases have been removed. What causes mutations then? We're looking at radiation, and the main one is UV light. And we get UV light mainly from the sun, and the most common one are like sunbaths and the use of sunbaths. Describe cystic fibrosis. So it's a recessive condition and it causes excess mucus on the lungs. So how do you draw an inheritance cross for cystic fibrosis? I've drawn it that both parents, that the mother is big B, little b, so she's heterozygous. And then I've drawn the father the same, that he's big B, little b, heterozygous again. And as you can see here, we have our one child who has cystic fibrosis, which gives a 25% chance if both parents are carriers. How is cystic fibrosis currently treated? It's treated with physiotherapy, where they beat the chest to try and bring up the excess mucus, and steroid injections. How might gene therapy be used in the future? Well, we can replace the recessive gene, the damaged gene for cystic fibrosis, with a healthy gene from someone else, and then cure the cystic fibrosis. What does evolution mean? With that question, so evolution is the adaptation of a species until a new one is formed. Until a new species is formed. From there then, what does survival of the fittest mean? Organisms with the advantage or with the mutated gene survive and the others without it do not. What does adaptation mean? The characteristics that enable organisms to survive. Describe the evolution of moths in Britain. So before the Industrial Revolution, the bark on trees were quite light, so the white moths had an advantage because they were camouflaged from predators. The black moths were being killed due to predation, and their population numbers were a lot lower than the white moths. Okay. After the Industrial Revolution then, a lot of soot from the industries were on the trees, so the bark became a lot darker. With that then, the black moths now have the advantage. As the soot got darker and the environment in which they lived in got darker, they then became camouflaged. With that then, the predators couldn't find them, so their population sizes increased. However then, the white moths that were once the favourable characteristic become disadvantaged, and therefore then they were no longer camouflaged from predation, so their numbers have decreased. What is natural selection? So natural selection is organisms pass on their advantageous gene or their mutated gene to their offspring, and then the offspring then are able to survive and do the exact same thing. How might some species become extinct? Through loss of habitat, through hunting, through deforestation, etc. Okay, so that is our review sheet for our topic variation and evolution.